Of this case now. We're fortunate to have labor attorney Amy Feldman with us, and she's the general counsel of the judge group. Amy, thank you for being with us. If we can bring Amy on up. And as we bring you up, I just want to, just for clarity's sake, first question, aside from thanking you, that's not a question, is to just double check. Have you at any time represented, whether it's the MTA or any of the unions that are involved here?
In this case.
I'm sorry, if you could repeat that. We didn't have you up all the way, Amy.
Oh, I was saying I do not represent either of the parties on this side. I have dealt with labor union negotiations, but am not involved in this case.
All right, terrific. Well, then let's jump on in. Our reporter Stephanie Bertini has echoed one of the issues, the main issues that we heard about, which is the raise in the fourth year of this contract, whether it's a 3% raise that the MTA has offered or a 5% raise that the union has demanded. Is that the main sticking point right now?
So it is generally, and that I would
He
like
went
to
to like a Zoom. He went to an
because
expert
the hardest part
who was slated for
when you
8:15.
have
I don't
just
know. That's
one
weird.
issue left. A lot of times they'll come in with 20 different issues and people think, how are you ever going to get to a resolution? But that's a good thing because then every side can declare victory on at least a couple things. Some of them will be no-brainers. Look, we want to have a bulletin board in every break room. We want to be able to host our meetings publicly once a quarter. Okay, management can give into that stuff. It doesn't cost them money. It's when you get down to this one issue,
We're after this, I guess.
dollar bill. Now you're talking about a zero-sum game. For every dollar I get, you lose a dollar. And now it's really a battle because now somebody's going to have to go back and say, sorry, boys, we lost this one. That's where we are.
All right. What happens now? The negotiations collapsed yesterday. That does not sound like they're at the table today. Is there like a cooling off period, or when do you expect them to resume? Because to wait until Monday at rush hour, it's going to be a little bit late for the people who get jammed up in that, right?
Oh, no. And actually, I don't think people think of it this way, but the fact is there's actually 3 different negotiations that are going on right now, if you think about it. Okay, the first one is just what we are talking about. What's going on in the room where it happens, where the main speakers for both sides are sitting across the table from each other, banging their fists on that table and saying, you're wrong, no, you're wrong. Here's why we need the money. Here's why we can't afford the money. That is the big negotiation that everybody thinks of when they talk about negotiations. But there are 2 others that are going on right now as we speak that people don't realize how important they are to this whole process.
All right, Amy.
First,
sorry, keep going.
No, so the first one is what we're seeing now on this and this very station, which is as it's playing out in real time to the public. This is now a negotiation for public sentiment. And it's really important in this case because these are elected public officials we're talking about. They need to somehow get the public on their side. And it's just what you heard in the last report, which is the union is saying, look, our rates, our wages are not keeping up with inflation. So even though these seem like high rates, we're living in one of the most expensive cities in the country. You couldn't possibly be comparing our wages with rural Alabama. Of course, they're going to be higher than most, but it's still not enough. And it's not as much as we used to get paid. Even though the dollars may be the same, our buying power is a lot less. And we are just trying to keep up so we can still afford the life that we are leading here. On the other hand, you have the politicians and you have the MTA saying, look, when you're talking about a budget of this size and with these wages, every percentage that we increase wages increases our costs by $100 million. And at a certain point, if we give in to these demands, we are going to have to raise the rates, the fares, for 250,000 daily riders. Now you have the public's attention. Now they're saying, look, I do want what's best for the workers who I see every morning. On the other hand, I'm barely affording my life to get into New York City. How on earth do you expect me to do it with an 8% fare increase? So that is another place that this battle is playing out for the hearts and minds of the public in the state.
All right. Well,
And
Amy,
then the third one is where it's actually going to happen, which is when those negotiators go back to their respective sides and say, where else are we going to find the money for what we need to get this deal done?
all right. And my last question to you is, we talk about the wages as one thing, but the overtime is really a core issue for the MTA and reining that in. The example they like to give is one like when a train motorman switches from a diesel vehicle to a gas-powered vehicle, they get 2 days of pay. If they bring that vehicle, that locomotive back to the station, that's 3 days of pay that they get that day. The MTA says that's not sustainable. I get it from the union standpoint. They're saying, well, we're not going to bargain for something that's going to give the take-home, that's going to reduce the take-home salary. So where do they meet here, and is it a fair grievance that the MTA has put on the table here?
So what you've said is actually, and what I just heard Stephanie say is that what they're now doing is they are moving the pots of money as best that they can, right? So what you heard was the union said, "What is this about healthcare costs? Where did this suddenly come in?" What I think is happening is it's their idea of how do you widen the pie a little? Where else are we going to get money? So one of the proposals that was put out there was we have this whole budget, and it's not just wages, right? It's also healthcare costs that are out of control, or overtime that's out of control, or all of the other costs we have. What if we could pay less for that pot of money, those health benefits, if we asked the new employees to pay a greater share of their health care costs? How would that play? Well, it turns out that one did not play well at all, and was in danger of derailing all of this. But my guess is that when it really plays out, it's probably going to go to some of those other pots of money. And I think probably the overtime is a non-starter because that's real money in people's pockets. But I wonder if they won't start looking at things like their capital expenditures, their infrastructure projects that they're working on. How many of those can be delayed without compromising safety in a way that might give them a little bit more cushion so that they would be able to not hurt the workers, increase wages, at least to a point that the union will be able to accept, and still walk away without having to raise the fares, which is certainly the politicians' best, what they want to do more than anything, which is not anger all of the rest of the people who are going to be hurt in this process.
All right, Amy Feldman, we'll have to leave it there. But next time we talk to you, I'm going to ask you whether or not the White House's decision last year to cut the mediation process sort of forced this situation here. We're going to pin that for next time. Unfortunately, I think we will see you again before this is over. General Counsel for the Judge Group, Amy, thank you so much for your time. Really appreciate it.
It's a pleasure.
All right.